Hi friends, after a while we are again back with another requested video series. This time the question has been sent by one of our users called Srikanth Jamuri, and the question is on a very important topic which is on deployment pipelines. So deployment pipelines have been there for a while inside Power BI, and it's the main mechanism by which you can migrate your code through multiple environments. And as a part of any project you take, you will have the requirement of moving your code across multiple environments, starting with the development environment. Once you are done with your local development, then moving over to the test and finally to your production. So traditionally the project team used to manage it using multiple workspaces. Once the deployment pipelines got introduced, they made our life much easier by making use of these pipelines so as to effectively move your artifacts, which includes your reports, your data sets, your data flow across multiple environments. And this is a very important topic once you start working on Power BI, to make sure that you can migrate your project smoothly across environments. Even when you are going to certification examinations like DA100, for example, deployment pipelines forms one of the main concepts. So make sure you follow this video and understand the concept, which will help you in your project work as well as in case you want to take the certifications. So without wasting any time, let's go and start seeing a demo of how we can create a deployment pipeline and how you can use it for effectively moving your resources once you are done with your local development through the various environments. To start off, I have a Power BI report which I created in Power BI desktop, and I'm going to deploy it to my Power BI portal. I've already connected to my sample user which I have created inside Power BI portal, and this is a premium per user, licensed user, and he will have premium access of course. And now I'm going to publish this report onto our Power BI portal. So assume that we have done with the development, the local development of this report, and now we are going to add it to our Power BI portal for collaborating. So the straightforward way to do it is by using this publish feature. So when you click on the publish feature, it will first ask you to save your changes, and then it will provide you with the details of all the workspaces available inside your Power BI portal by means of this registered signed in user. So I am going to choose demo workspace for this example, and now it will ask me that because this report is already existing there, it asks whether I need to replace it. I am going to give it the replace option. So the latest version of this report is going to be deployed to the Power BI portal in a while. So now you see the success message which shows that the report has been successfully deployed. So now let's go back to the Power BI portal and check this report. So let's go to the Power BI portal, to the home page, and here you have the different workspaces. I'm going to go to the demo workspace where I deployed the report, and you can see that there are also other reports which are deployed. Along with this, we have this report also currently deployed. And because this is a replace, which means that the report already existed, we already have the data set also created, and we have also in the settings we have added it to a gateway, because this is a on-premise data source. It is connecting to my SQL server, local SQL server. So I have my gateway connection and everything set up here, and it is running on my machine as well, the gateway, and through the gateway it will connect to my data sources. And now if you want, you can even try refreshing it from here, because the gateway is set up and also the credentials are also mapped correctly. It will now do the refresh, which means that the report is currently in the dev environment. So now we are ready to collaborate. In case there are multiple people who are working on a dashboard, and this dashboard is going to use reports from different people, now they can use this dashboard and add one or more of my reports also inside that. So this is how the collaboration happens. So you do part of the Power BI report, you create some reports, there will be other people who will also be working on the same project, and they will be creating their own reports. Each will be in its own PBIX files, each will be using their own data sources. And once they have done with it, they deploy it to the workspace, and if there is a person who is planning to create dashboards on top of it, he can use a dashboard now, and he can add the reports inside that, one or more of the reports inside that, either as pages or as visuals. This is how the collaboration happens. So now that I have created the report, and also imagine that these reports were, the other reports were deployed by other people. So there is a report that is added by me, there is a report which is added by another user, and there is also another This is a paginated report. If you see the icon, you will be able to understand that this is a paginated report. This is a normal Power BI report. So now if I want to deploy it through the various environments, how can I do it? So let's first start off. There are two ways in which these deployment pipelines works. One is the legacy way, which is what people used to do before the deployment pipelines came into being, and second is the new method. So the current method is like, we have now created the workspace in dev, we have added all the artifacts inside that. Now it is ready for us to move through different environments. So we'll start off by going to the deployment pipelines. Again, you have two places where you can do this. One is from here by going to the deployment pipeline, and you can start creating a pipeline. Another easiest way is by going within your workspace itself. So if you go back to your workspace itself, you can see a small button on top which shows create a pipeline. So both the ways you can start creating the deployment pipeline, and make sure that your workspace is a premium workspace. If you see this diamond icon, it means that it's a premium workspace. So pipelines can only be created on a premium accounts. So there are two types of premium licenses in Power BI. One is premium per user, which is what I am using, which is what is shown here, PPU trial. So I have 4 days left in it, and this user has a PPU trial. That is one way. The other one is the premium capacity. So both ways you can take the advantage of these premium features. So once you have this workspace created with premium feature, you will get this button. I can click on this create pipeline, and now I have to name this pipeline. So I am going to name it as ABC project. Okay, and then I'm clicking on create. It's very straightforward. It is going to create a new pipeline for me, and it will ask you what is the environment in which you need to add. So you can have it either as development at first, then test, then prod, or you can even start from production and come backwards. Both the ways are possible. Because of the legacy way in which people used to do it, it even supports moving back from the production backward. So here I am going with the new way. So I have just created my report. I have just deployed it in the workspace. There are also other people who have added reports. Now we are going to create the development environment inside your deployment pipeline. So I am selecting development and clicking on assign, and immediately you can see that the dev is now automatically replaced by the name of your workspace. This is the name of your workspace. If you click on that, it will take you back to the development workspace where you have added your reports. If you want to come back, you can click on this deployment pipeline, and you can click on the name of this pipeline. So as you see, there are 2 data sets and there are 3 reports. If you remember, there were 3 reports. One was the paginated report, and the other 2 are Power BI reports, and then you have the 2 data sets, the data sets which are used by your Power BI report. Now if you want to move it to the test, so now you have moved it to the dev, and once you are all happy with the development test, you have done your collaborative test. Suppose that you are creating some dashboard on top of it, and you have done the tests and you're happy with that. Now it's ready for you to move to the next environment. What you can do is like, you can deploy to the test. And by the way, you can directly go and check on these reports in dev, or if you want to create an app to distribute it to all the users who are having access to the development environment, you can do that here also. At this point, if you want to click on view app, it will take you to the corresponding applications. So it will automatically install the app, and it will give you the app. So any people who has actually installed the application, they will be able to access all these reports in the development environment, and they can see. So as of now, I have only included these 2 reports inside app. So this is because if you go back, you can see that I have opted out the Power BI paginated report from the app. This is what indicates when you create the app. I have already created the app once, so that's why it is asking for update app. So I have not included this report inside the app. This include in app button can be turned off and turned on. So because I have turned it off, you don't see it inside your application. You can see only these 2 reports, the Dataverse DQ example and the my reports. Only these 2 reports you can see it. If you want to include the other report also inside that, what you need to do is like, you need to go back, click on this button, and now you can update the app. So once you update the app, then you will be able to see the other report also inside this. So this is how the mapping between the app and the workspace happens. So you can decide which all artifacts inside the workspace can be included within your app. So now if you see, you can see the cohorts also here. So now you have cohorts, you have the Dataverse example, and also your report that you have deployed. So all the 3 reports are now included, and now you are happy with it. If you want, you can go and test it from the app. You can distribute it to the people, and if you want to directly come and test it from the portal, even that is also possible. Both of them are possible. And from here, once you are deploying to test, what you can do is you can click on deploy to test. At this point also, you can determine whether you need to deploy all or you need to deploy only some of them. So now I am only going to deploy these 2 reports. So I'll just select only those 2 data sets and those 2 reports. I am leaving out this cohorts. And if I click on deploy to test, automatically these reports will be deployed to the test. And in a while, automatically it creates so as you see, what it is doing is like it is creating a new workspace. So behind the scene, it creates a new workspace for this test environment, and it will copy all the artifacts from your dev onto the test. So in a while, you will see all these things created in the test. And once the deployment is seen, you can see there is a difference. See, you can see only 2 data sets and 2 reports. There is there is 3 reports because we have already excluded 1 report. Now if you see the details, you can see that only these 2 are deployed. And at any point of time, if you want to compare, you can click on compare, and it will see what is the difference. So it will see that there is 1 report which is there as a new report inside your dev, which is not yet there in the test. So if you want to later deploy it, you can select it and you can click on deploy to test, and it will also get included. So in this case, we are not going to do that. And one more small thing what you can do here is that, so here if you see, you have now deployed all your required reports onto the test environment. So most cases what happens is that you will have different data sources. There will be one data source which will be set for the development environment. There will be another data source which will be set for the test environment. So what you will do is like, as a part of deployment, you might have to repoint your sources so that it points to the correct data sets. And so here if you see the ABC bikes version, this data set is pointing to the dev version of my database. So if you go back to my database, I have 3 databases inside my server. One is for dev, one is for production, one is for test. And this report is pointing to the dev version. So if you go to the settings, you can see that it is pointing to the ABC bikes dev version. But when it goes to test, I want to make sure that it is pointing to the corresponding test version. So for that, you don't need to do any changes to your report. All you need to do is like come back here, and here you can change it here. Much more easier thing is to click this, which is known as the deployment settings, and here you can set a rule for that. So the rule is that when it comes to the test for this both the data sets, what is it that you need to do? So here I am going to change this data set so as to point to a new database. So here I need to first choose my data source. So my data source is ABC bikes dev desktop. This is a server. So I am going to change it to a new one. So here instead of ABC bikes dev, I am going to make it ABC bikes test, so that it is going to point to the test version of my database. So click on save, and you can directly do it from here. So you don't have to change anything in the data sets. So now I have mapped it. So now if you go and check it in both the cases, you can see that. So now the rules is now present. So what it does is that it will automatically map it to the corresponding database from the corresponding source. Now in the workspaces, you can see 2 workspace. This workspace was automatically created by the deployment pipeline. So now that the mapping rules are set for the data set, now let's again go and deploy to test. Now what will happen is that this time it is going to automatically map it to the correct data source as per our rule. So what I have done is, again I am only selecting those 2 Power BI reports, and this time this data set ABC updated version data set will be automatically changed to point to the test version of the database as per the rule that you have set. So click on deploy to test, and immediately you can see a warning inside your dataset, which means that the dataset has now been changed. Wait for the deployment to be succeeded. So the deployment is now successful. Again, you can see the 2 reports and the 2 datasets. We have excluded this report from there, and either if you want, you can go to the workspace. We are not going to do that. Instead of that, we can try to refresh it. So now when you are trying to refresh it, you can see that there is a warning message which is coming. Datasets could not be refreshed. Expand the show more list for details. And when you click on the show more, you can see that the warning is against this data source. This is a data source which we set a rule to make it point to the test database. The reason why it is throwing this warning is because this is an on-premise data source. So any new data source you are going to add, you need to map it in your gateway. Now this mapping is not done for the new data source which you have set inside the rule. So for that purpose, you click on the ellipsis and go to settings, and here you will see that error. See the gateway connection, you can see that it's not configured correctly because now it is pointing to the test version of the database which is not set up inside your gateway. Your gateway should have the mapping for all the data sources used inside your Power BI. So click on the configure icon and you can see that this time it is pointing to the test version. It clearly shows that it's ABC Bikes test. So click on clicking add to gateway, and it will ask you for setting the data source credentials. So you can set the same credentials that you use for dev, because I have given the access for the same credentials. And now if you see, it's now successful, and now you need to come back and just set the mapping correctly. You created the new data source, just set a mapping, click on apply, and now the refresh will be successful. Now if you go back and try to refresh it from within your deployment pipeline, it should be successful. You can go back to the deployment pipeline, click on the project, and you can click on refresh all, and now it will start the refresh, and you can see that all the refresh will be success because the mapping has been set. So you don't get any error indicating that the refresh was success. Now if you click on published app, and if you go to the app and check that, we can see that the data now corresponds to the test data. So you can go to the publish app option and click on publish app, and you can just set a description for this. So just you can say a test version of the app, just any meaningful description that you need to set, and click on publish app. And once the app is published, you can go and check the data. You will see the difference here because I have set in the test app, updated all the descriptions to contain the word test. See, you can see that everything contains the word test, indicating that this is coming from the test database. If you go to the dev and click on the view app, you will not see this. This is pointing to the dev version of the database. So you don't see the test. Here you see the test, so which means that the database has been correctly pointed. So now that you have done with the deployment to the test as well, now if you want to deploy to the production, you can do the same. You can click on deploy to production, it will get automatically deployed to the production. That is one way of doing things. Another way, if you want, is you can, if you have already created the workspace, you can also assign it from there. That is how you do it in the legacy method. So now let's first do it in the new method, and then let's see how we can do it in the legacy method as well. So now the deployment production is also done. So if you want to change the rules now here, you can again go there, select the corresponding data source, click and add a rule. Now it's pointing to test. Here instead of that, you can point it to production. So here instead of that, you can set it to prod, indicating that from here, if you want to deploy, it needs to point to the prod version. Keep in mind that you can also do it for your parameters. In this case, my data source didn't have any parameters, but if your data source has a parameter, you can also set it for your parameters. Here I am setting it only for the data source. There are two types of objects that can be set from here. One is the data source, another one is the parameter. The parameter is disabled here because we don't have any parameters. Only case where you can't set a rule for your parameter is for the paginated reports. For the paginated reports, you will not be able to make it dynamic at this point in time. So click on save now. So the rule is set, click on deploy to production, and now if you try to refresh it, you will again see the same error. So the deployment is again done, click on refresh all, and you will be able to see that error again. See the error. Now if you again go to show more, and you need to change the corresponding settings and add it inside your gateway. Keep in mind that this is only for the on-premise data sources. For the cloud data sources, assuming that the data source is up and running, you will still be able to connect it. This step is only required if you are using an on-premise data source like SQL Server in this case. See, this is the prod one. Add to data gateway. It will add it as a new data source. Make sure you set the credentials correctly. I already have the credentials stored here. If it's not stored, you need to make sure that you are entering it manually. So now that the mapping has been done, you can come here and set it to the new data source that you created, which is data source 4. So map it to data source 4 and then apply it, and once that is done, now you can come back and open it in a new app after publishing it, and then you will be able to see the production version of the data as well. So again, you can click on publish app. For that, if you want, you can refresh it once to make sure that everything is working fine. The refresh is done now, so click on publish app. Again, give a meaningful description. So we are just giving production version, and then you can just click on publisher, and once it gets published you will be able to see the production data. So now go to the app, you will be able to see the production data. You will see all the descriptions with the name prod in it. See, everything contains prod. So this is the production version, this is your test version, and this is your dev version. So through your deployment pipeline you are able to publish the apps which points to the corresponding version of the database. It's easier for the users now to test it to the relevant versions. And for each of these, because this creates one workspace on the background, you can always go to the workspace and give it access to a different set of people. You can click on the access and you can assign members to different roles here. So you can add a new member and add him to the contributor role or viewer role or whatever you want for each of these workspaces. Another place where you can set the access is when you are creating the app. So if you go back to the deployment pipelines, and if you see the app, there also you can set the permissions. When you are clicking on update app, you can see that here also you can set the permissions to give the permission to the corresponding individuals or groups, or if you want to give it for entire organization also you can do it. And one more thing is you can even control who can use this data, whether they can be able to create other reports based on copy of these, or they can use the underlying data sets for build permission. All these permissions can be set at the time of creating the application also. So this is how the deployment pipeline works in the new mode, which is by using the deployment pipeline you are automatically creating the workspaces. In the legacy system, what you do is like first you will create separate workspaces. Like see, I have already created one for test. I'll already create a workspace for the test, and similarly I'll create one for the production. And what I will do is like I'll go to the workspace, and in that case you have to come back and you have to publish the reports separately for each of those workspaces. So when you want to publish it to the test workspace, you need to go and change the source automatically. Go to the data source settings and change the source yourself before you deploy it. In the other case it will be automatically done by your mapping rule. In this case you have to manually do it. This is the legacy way. Before deployment pipelines came in, this was how people used to do it. So now I make it point to the test one. I'll apply the changes. You can immediately see the data change here. All this will change to test. So the data is now changed. You can click on publish and you can make it publish to the new workspace that you have already created and set up. So now you will select demo for test and click on select, and it will now replace the report there with this new version which is pointing to the test. You have manually changed it. And once the publishing is done, you can go back and you can click on the demo for test and you can see the new version of the report. If you click on that, you can see that it will point to the test version. So now that you've created the separate workspaces, what you can do is like you can go to the deployment pipeline, create a pipeline. So I will just make it legacy deployment. You can name it anything you want and click on create. And what I'll do is like instead of choosing a workspace, what I'll do is like I'll select one here. So I can select a workspace here. So I have already created one for test. Now I'll create another one for dev. So this is how it used to happen in the legacy, and I'll automatically give the access to the required people here, and it has to be a premium per user. So I'll save it and then I'll again come back to the report. So this is how I do everything manually in this case. Whatever automatically the deployment model is doing in the other case, here I have to do it manually. So I have to come here and I have to change it to dev. As you see, the data has now changed to reflect the dev data. Now click on publish, and now you need to select the demo for dev workspace. Now if you go inside the dev, you will be able to see the dev version of the report. Now once these two are done, let's go back to the deployment pipeline and we will click on legacy deployment. For the dev, we will here assign it from here to the dev and click on assign a workspace. Automatically it will take that report, and similarly for the test, you can set it for test and assign a workspace. So it's the same thing, it works in the same way. Only difference is that here we create the workspaces manually first ourselves. We will change the data source properties ourselves inside Power BI desktop, and then we will deploy it manually. And in that deployment pipeline, we will just link it. And once it is linked, you can compare and you can see which is whether it is different or things like that, and then you can go ahead. So like this, you can do it. Recommended approach here would be the new approach, which is you starting from a workspace, creating the required reports inside that, giving the required people the access, and once you have started on the deployment pipeline, you can deploy it to the next stage like the test. It will automatically create the workspace, go inside the workspace and change the access so as to give only the required people access to the test environment, like mostly the testers, and the developers might also have view access, and maybe some others like the managers or lead or someone. And then at the same time, you can also set a rule for mapping the corresponding data source settings to the corresponding environment, like and also any parameters you want. And like this, you can keep on doing until the production environment. So this is how the deployment pipelines works in the two modes. One is the new mode, which is the recommended one. Another one is basically the legacy mode, which is just given for the backward compatibility in cases you want to map them back to the deployment pipelines. You already have separate workspaces set and this project has been going for a while, but you now want to map it to the corresponding stages in deployment pipeline, means you can use this method. So hope this illustration helped you to understand the concept of deployment pipelines in details and how you can implement this concept inside your Power BI portal. As shown by the illustration, there are two methods of doing it. One is the current method where you start with a workspace, and once you're done with your development, once you have brought all your artifacts inside that, you can create a deployment pipeline from that, and you can move across multiple environments. Each environment you'll be able to compare the artifacts with the corresponding artifacts in the other environment. You can also remap by setting rules any of the properties like the data source settings as well as the parameterized settings, except for the paginated reports. Once each environment is deployed, you can always create an app which points to the corresponding environment, and at the app level or at the workspace level for each of the environments you can set a different set of accesses for the people depending on the role of the people. As usual, keep sending your feedback on this video, and I hope this will be really beneficial for the people who are using deployment pipelines in their project as well as for the people who are preparing for the Power BI certifications, because deployment pipelines are a common topic from where you can expect some questions inside your Power BI certification examinations. Feel free to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon for getting useful tips like this. See you all in the next video. Till then, bye and thanks for your time.